In the muddy light of that rainy Thursday morning, I offered to help my daughter carry boxes to her new apartment. That's when Mia looked at me, her eyes cold and distant, and said the words that would haunt me for months. "Stay away. You've done enough damage to this family." I stood there, the manila envelope with the deed clutched in my trembling hand, raindrops soaking through my jacket. Mia didn't know what I carried with me that morning. She didn't know the truth I'd been protecting her from. "I just want to help," I said, my voice barely audible above the rain hitting the moving truck's metal roof. "We don't need your kind of help, Mom," Mia snapped, grabbing a box labeled kitchen from the back of the truck. "Dad was right about you all along." The pain that shot through my chest was sharp enough to take my breath away. For 29 years I had been Mia's mother. I had kissed scraped knees, stayed up through fevers, helped with science projects, and celebrated every small victory. But standing there in that parking lot, watching my daughter look at me like I was a stranger, worse, an enemy, I realized how completely David had poisoned her against me. "Your father doesn't tell you everything, Mia," I said quietly. "Don't start," she warned, her voice rising. "I'm not doing this today. Just leave, please. Jason is coming to help me instead." Jason, my son. The thought of my children united against me made my knees weak. How had it come to this? I watched Mia struggle with the heavy box, her arms shaking slightly under the weight. Every instinct in my body screamed to reach out, to take the burden from her as I had done countless times before. But the invisible wall between us was impenetrable. "I'll go," I whispered. "But Mia, someday you'll understand." She didn't respond, just turned and walked toward her new building without looking back. I sat in my car for a long time, raindrops racing down the windshield, blurring the world outside. My mind drifted back to 20 years earlier, when I had walked away from a promising career in architectural design to raise my children. David had been so convincing then, talking about how important it was for the kids to have a full-time mother. "You can always go back to work later," he had said. "But these years with the children? You'll never get those back." And I had believed him. I had made my family my career, my purpose, my everything. While David climbed the corporate ladder, I built our home. I was the one who knew which teddy bear Jason couldn't sleep without, which foods made Mia break out in hives, which teacher had recognized our daughter's gift for mathematics. I was there for every moment, large and small, until 3 years ago when David began to change. Little things at first, coming home later, criticizing my appearance, questioning my spending habits. Then bigger things, separate vacations, separate bank accounts, separate bedrooms. When I finally confronted him about the distance growing between us, his response chilled me to the bone. "I've outgrown you, Tammy," he said, as if discussing an old shirt he no longer wore. "You've let yourself go. You have nothing interesting to say anymore. You're just there." The divorce proceedings that followed were brutal. David, with his corporate salary and connections, hired the best lawyers. He twisted every story, painting me as clingy, controlling, unstable. Somehow, he convinced our children that I was the villain in our family story. And they believed him. All except for my grandmother, Ruth. She saw through David's charm, his manipulations. "Men like him are hollow inside," she told me once. "They fill themselves with other people's light, and then blame them for the darkness." Ruth's farmhouse, the deed to which now sat in the envelope beside me, was the only thing that had remained truly mine through it all. The only piece of my heritage David couldn't touch, despite his best efforts. What Mia didn't know, what David had made sure she would never believe, was that her father had tried to force me to sign over that property to fund his risky business venture. When I refused, his rage had been terrifying. That was the real reason for our split, not the convenient narrative he'd created about my supposed inadequacies. I finally started the car, the envelope heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. As I pulled away from my daughter's new life, a life that no longer had room for me, I made a decision. The time for silence was over. I would fight for my children to know the truth, even if it broke my heart all over again. But first, I needed to face the house that had started it all. The farmhouse looked smaller than I remembered. Standing in the overgrown driveway, I felt a strange mix of comfort and sadness wash over me. Grandma Ruth's home had always been my sanctuary, even as a child. Now, with tall grass tickling my ankles and ivy creeping up the porch railings, it looked abandoned. much like I felt. I climbed the creaking steps and unlocked the door, the familiar scent of old wood and lavender greeting me. Ruth had been gone for 2 years, but sometimes I could still hear her voice in these rooms, steady and wise. "Tammy girl," she'd say. "The truth has a way of rising to the surface, no matter how deep you bury it." The manila envelope felt heavy in my hands as I sat at the kitchen table, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. I carefully removed the deed and spread it flat before me. This piece of paper had become the center of the storm that tore my family apart, though my children didn't know it. When Ruth passed away, she left her farmhouse and the surrounding 5 acres solely to me. "This land has always passed from woman to woman in our family," her will stated clearly, "to provide independence when the world tries to take it away." At first, David had been dismissive of the inheritance. "A run-down old farmhouse? What good is that to anyone?" he'd scoffed. But that changed when a developer began buying up properties in the area. Suddenly, my worthless inheritance had potential. "We could sell it and invest in my new business venture," David had announced one night over dinner, as if the decision had already been made. "It's a sure thing, Tammy. We'd triple our money in a year." But I had seen the numbers he tried to hide, watched his nervous twitching when calls from unknown numbers lit up his phone. His sure thing was anything but, and I refused to sign away the only thing that was truly mine. That's when the coldness began. When the whispered phone calls started, I traced the property lines on the deed with my fingertip, remembering that final argument 3 years ago. David's face had turned an alarming shade of red as he slammed his fist on this very table. "You're being selfish," he'd shouted. "After everything I've done for this family, you won't do this one thing? This house isn't yours to take," I had replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "And neither am I." The next day he moved out. Within a week, he told the children I had forced him to leave. Within a month, Mia and Jason barely spoke to me. Within a year, the divorce was final and I was alone. What my children never saw were the late-night emails I discovered on David's laptop. Messages to his business partner Thomas. "Once Tammy signs over the property, we'll be set. She's being difficult, but she'll cave. She always does." Another one read, "Don't worry about the kids. They'll believe whatever I tell them. Tammy has always been too busy being their friend to be respected as their parent. It's almost too easy." I gathered those emails as evidence during the divorce, but David's lawyer somehow got them dismissed. Just another successful manipulation from a man who had built his career on them. I was startled from my thoughts by a knock at the door. Through the window, I saw an older man in overalls standing on the porch. "Harold Jenkins, Ruth's neighbor from down the road. Thought I saw your car pull in," he said when I opened the door. His weathered face crinkled with concern. "You doing all right, Tammy? Haven't seen you around here in a while." I invited him in, grateful for the friendly face. Harold had known Ruth for decades, had helped her maintain the property when she became too frail to do it herself. "I've been meaning to stop by with these," he said, placing a small box on the table. "Found them when I was clearing out my shed. Some old letters and photos Ruth gave me for safekeeping years ago. Said if anything ever happened to her, I should make sure you got them." My hands trembled as I opened the box. Inside were bundles of letters tied with faded ribbon, and beneath them, something unexpected. A folder containing what looked like bank statements and legal documents. "Ruth was sharp as a tack right to the end," Harold said, watching me examine the contents. "She told me, Harold, my granddaughter married a snake, and someday she'll need proof of its venom. Never quite understood what she meant until your divorce made the local gossip rounds." I felt a chill run down my spine as I scanned the first document. It was a loan application in David's name, using the farmhouse as collateral, dated 6 months before he ever mentioned selling the property to me. His signature was there, clear as day, along with Thomas's as co-applicant. They had attempted to secure a loan against property they didn't own, property they had no legal right to. "There's more," Harold said quietly. "Ruth hired a private investigator to look into your husband's business. Those reports are in there too." My mind was racing. Had Ruth known all along what David was planning? Had she been protecting me even after her death? "Why didn't you give me these before?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Harold shifted uncomfortably. Ruth was specific about the timing. Said you wouldn't be ready to see them until you'd stood on your own 2 feet for a while. Said David would try to twist things, make you doubt yourself. She wanted you strong enough to face what's in those papers. I felt tears well up in my eyes, both from gratitude and grief. Even from beyond the grave, my grandmother was looking out for me. And she was right 2 years ago. Fresh from the divorce and reeling from my children's rejection, I might have buckled under the weight of these revelations. But now, as I carefully spread the documents across the kitchen table, something else was taking root in my heart. Not just anger or vindication, but determination. For the first time since David walked out, I saw a path forward. A way to reclaim not just my relationship with my children, but my own story. Thank you, Harold, I said, newfound resolve strengthening my voice. I think I'm finally ready to use these. After Harold left, I spent hours going through every document, every letter, piecing together the extent of David's deception. The truth was even worse than I'd imagined. But now I had proof. Concrete, undeniable proof of who David really was. The question was, how would I get Mia and Jason to see it? I spent 3 days sorting through the documents Harold had given me, spreading them across Ruth's kitchen table like puzzle pieces of a life I thought I knew. Each letter, each bank statement revealed another layer of David's deception. It wasn't just about the farmhouse. It was systematic, calculated manipulation that had started years before our divorce. There were copies of emails between David and Thomas discussing high-risk, high-reward investments using money David didn't have. There were photos of David meeting with people the private investigator identified as known fraudsters. Most devastatingly, there were transcripts of phone calls where David explicitly discussed turning the children against me. Tammy's weak point is the kids, he had told Thomas. If they side with me, she'll crumble. She'll sign anything just to win back their approval. Reading those words, I felt physically ill. The man I had loved, the father of my children, had weaponized our family against me. He'd made a strategic decision to destroy my relationship with Mia and Jason. Not out of anger or spite, but as a business tactic. I called my lawyer, Ellen, and arranged to meet her the next day. I needed to know if these documents could help me legally. But more importantly, I needed to know if they could help me reach my children. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Jason. Mom, we're having dinner at Dad's on Friday. He wants to discuss something important about the family. He said you should come. My heart raced. David hadn't invited me to anything in years. What was he planning? I responded carefully. I'll be there. What time? 7 p.m. Dad says to be punctual. Even through text, I could feel the coolness in my son's words. The Jason I raised would have added a love you, or at least a heart emoji. This distant, formal stranger was David's creation. Friday evening, I parked outside the sprawling colonial where David now lived with his girlfriend, Angela. The house was at least twice the size of our family home, with a 3-car garage and professionally landscaped gardens. David had clearly landed on his feet after the divorce. Mia's car was already in the driveway, as was Jason's motorcycle. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the front door and rang the bell. Angela answered, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. She was younger than me, not dramatically so, but enough to notice. Everything about her seemed polished. Her sleek blonde hair, her tailored outfit, her French manicured nails. Tammy, she said with practiced politeness, everyone's in the dining room. I followed her through the house, noting the expensive furniture, the artwork that must have cost thousands. When we reached the dining room, 3 heads turned toward me. David sat at the head of the table, looking prosperous in a cashmere sweater. Mia and Jason flanked him, a united front. You're late, David said, checking his watch. I glanced at my phone. It was 7:03 p.m. Sorry, I said, taking the only empty seat, at the opposite end of the table from David. Traffic. David nodded to Angela, who brought out plates of perfectly seared salmon, asparagus, and roasted potatoes. For a few minutes, everyone ate in uncomfortable silence. Finally, David cleared his throat. I asked you all here because I have an announcement. Thomas and I have secured funding for our new business venture. My stomach tightened. After what I'd learned from Ruth's documents, any business involving Thomas set off alarm bells. That's great, Dad, Jason said, his face lighting up with genuine pride. My heart ached seeing that expression, one I used to receive. There's just one final hurdle, David continued, his eyes now fixed on me. The farmhouse property. I set down my fork. What about it? Our investors are interested in that entire area for development. Your grandmother's property is the last piece they need. They're prepared to offer you well above market value. I looked around the table. Mia and Jason were watching me expectantly, as if waiting for me to say the obvious yes. It suddenly became clear. This dinner wasn't an olive branch. It was an ambush. The farmhouse isn't for sale, I said quietly. David's expression hardened. Don't be difficult, Tammy. This is a chance for all of us to benefit. The kids would get a share too. Is that why they're here? To pressure me. We're here because it's a family decision, Mia snapped. Though you've never been good at thinking about what's best for the family. The injustice of her words hit me like a physical blow. I had given everything to this family. My career, my dreams, my identity. And now they sat across from me, treating me like an obstacle to their happiness. You don't know what you're talking about, Mia, I said, my voice trembling. Don't speak to her like that, Jason cut in, his face flushing. I looked at my children, these adults who had once fit in the crook of my arm, who had once looked at me with complete trust and love. Now they stared at me with something between pity and contempt. Your father has been lying to you, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. He's been manipulating all of us for years. David laughed, that charming dismissive laugh that had once seemed so good-natured. Here we go again. Tammy, if you're going to start with the conspiracy theories. I have proof, I interrupted. Documents, emails, phone transcripts. He tried to take out loans against the farmhouse without my knowledge. He deliberately turned you both against me as a tactic to get the property. Mia rolled her eyes. Mom, stop. This is embarrassing. But Jason was looking at me more carefully. What documents? Before I could answer, David stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. I think you should leave, Tammy. You're clearly not well. I'm not leaving, I said, standing to match him. Not until my children hear the truth. David's face changed then, the mask of civility dropping to reveal the cold, calculated man I discovered in those documents. Angela, please show Tammy out. Don't bother, I said, reaching for my purse. I know the way. But this isn't over, David. Not by a long shot. I walked out, my legs shaking but my resolve stronger than ever. As I reached my car, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to find Jason standing there. His expression conflicted. What documents, Mom? He asked again. Come to the farmhouse tomorrow, I said. I'll show you everything. He hesitated, then nodded once before turning back toward the house. It wasn't much, but it was a start. For the first time in years, one of my children might be willing to listen. Morning came and went with no sign of Jason. I'd spent half the night arranging the documents in a way that told the story clearly. Bank statements showing David's mounting debt, emails revealing his desperation, the private investigator's reports detailing his associations with questionable business partners. By noon, I began to doubt Jason would come at all. I was weeding Ruth's neglected garden, needing physical activity to burn off my anxiety, when I heard a car pull into the driveway. But it wasn't Jason's motorcycle. It was a small blue Honda I didn't recognize. A young woman stepped out, petite with chestnut hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore jeans and a faded University of Michigan sweatshirt. It took me a moment to place her. Kelly, I called out, setting down my gardening trowel. Kelly had been Mia's best friend since middle school. They'd been inseparable throughout high school, but I'd lost track of her after the divorce. Last I heard, she'd moved to Chicago for graduate school. Mrs. Mitchell, she said, then corrected herself. Sorry, Miss Parker now, right? Back to your maiden name. I nodded, brushing dirt from my hands. It's just Tammy, please. What brings you here? Kelly fidgeted with her car keys. I was visiting my parents for the weekend and saw your car here. I've been meaning to reach out to you for a while, but... She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. Would you like to come in for some tea? I offered. Inside, Kelly sat at the kitchen table while I put the kettle on. She looked around the farmhouse with curious eyes. I always loved this place, she said. Remember when you let us camp out in the backyard during high school? Mia was terrified of the raccoons. The memory made me smile. She insisted on bringing a frying pan as a weapon, just in case. We both laughed, and for a moment, it felt like stepping into the past. A time when my relationship with my daughter wasn't fractured beyond recognition. As I set 2 mugs of tea on the table, Kelly's expression turned serious. I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure if I should. Mia might never forgive me, but... She took a deep breath. I can't keep watching what's happening to your family. It's not right. My heart began to race. What is it, Kelly? 2 years ago, right before your divorce was finalized, I overheard something I wasn't supposed to hear. She wrapped her hands around her mug. I was staying at your old house for the weekend. Mia and I had gone out, but I forgot my wallet and came back to get it. Mr. Mitchell, David, was in his office on the phone. He didn't know I was there. I waited, barely breathing, as Kelly gathered her thoughts. He was talking to someone about an affair he'd been having, for years apparently, with someone named Vanessa. Kelly looked up at me. He was laughing about how he'd managed to keep you in the dark, how he'd convinced the kids that the problems in your marriage were all your fault. The revelation shouldn't have shocked me after everything I discovered, but it did. An affair. Not just financial deception, but personal betrayal on the most intimate level. There's more, Kelly continued. He talked about gambling debts. Said he needed the money from your grandmother's property to get the sharks off his back. His exact words. Then he said something about how he'd convinced Mia that you were trying to sabotage their relationship, and that she was eating it up. My hands were shaking so badly that tea sloshed over the rim of my mug. Did you tell Mia what you heard? Kelly looked down, shame evident in her posture. I tried. She didn't believe me. She accused me of making it up because I was jealous of her relationship with her dad. We had a huge fight. That's why we drifted apart senior year. She never spoke to me again after that night. The pieces were falling into place. Mia's sudden coldness toward me had started around that time. Not gradually, as I'd always thought, but almost overnight. David must have accelerated his campaign against me when he realized Kelly might expose him. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. I ran into Jason yesterday at the coffee shop in town. He mentioned that you had documents proving David had been lying about something. It made me wonder if maybe now Mia might be ready to hear the truth. Kelly fidgeted with her mug. And honestly, I felt guilty for years. I should have tried harder to make Mia listen. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You were just a teenager, Kelly. This wasn't your responsibility. There's one more thing, she said. After Mia shut me out, I did some digging on my own. My uncle works for the bank where David has his accounts. He shouldn't have told me this, but David's been moving money offshore for years. And he's deeply in debt from gambling, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I remembered the pressure David had put on me to sell the farmhouse, his increasing desperation as I refused. It all made terrible sense now. Does Mia know any of this? I asked. Kelly shook her head. I don't think so. But... She hesitated. Jason might. The way he looked when I mentioned your documents yesterday. It was like he was confirming something he already suspected. Before I could respond, we heard the rumble of a motorcycle approaching. Through the kitchen window, I saw Jason parking next to Kelly's Honda. That's my cue to leave, Kelly said, standing up. I don't want to make things awkward. Wait, I said, grabbing a notepad from the counter. Let me give you my number. And thank you, Kelly. You have no idea what this means to me. She took the paper, then surprised me with a quick hug. I hope your family finds its way back to each other, Tammy. You deserve that. As Kelly slipped out the back door, Jason knocked on the front. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and went to face my son, armed with even more truth than I'd had before. When I opened the door, Jason stood there awkwardly, hands shoved in his jacket pockets. At 26, he looked so much like his father had at that age, tall, broad-shouldered, with the same cleft in his chin. But his eyes were mine. I wasn't sure you'd come, I said softly. Neither was I, he admitted. Dad said you're just trying to manipulate us again. The accusation stung, but I pushed past it. Come in. I'll show you what I found. As Jason stepped into Ruth's house, I saw his expression soften slightly. He'd spent summers here as a child, fishing in the creek with his great-grandmother, helping her collect eggs from the chickens she'd kept back then. Remember when you fell out of the apple tree and broke your arm? I asked, leading him toward the kitchen. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Gran Ruth told me I was as graceful as a one-legged moose. The small shared memory gave me hope. Somewhere under all of David's manipulation, my son was still there. The boy who had once trusted me completely. Jason, I said. What you're about to see might change everything you think you know about our family. Are you ready for that? He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Show me. For 2 hours, Jason sat at Ruth's kitchen table, silently reviewing the documents. His expression shifted from skeptical to confused to something darker as he pieced together the extent of his father's deception. I kept my distance, making us sandwiches and refilling his coffee, letting the evidence speak for itself. Why didn't you show us this during the divorce? He finally asked, his voice hollow. I sat across from him, cradling my own mug. I tried. David's lawyers got the emails dismissed as inadmissible. The phone transcripts came from Ruth's investigator after she died. I only found them a few days ago. Jason ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of the teenage boy I'd raised that my heart ached. And the gambling? The affair. I learned about those yesterday from Kelly. He nodded slowly. She texted me after she left. Said she'd been keeping secrets too long. He looked up at me, his eyes troubled. Did you know Dad threatened to cut off my tuition if I kept seeing you after the divorce? The revelation hit me like a physical blow. No, I didn't. He said you were unstable, that you'd try to turn me against him. Jason laughed bitterly. Turns out he was the one turning us against you. I reached for his hand and to my surprise he didn't pull away. I'm so sorry, Jason. I should have fought harder. No, he said firmly. This isn't on you. It's on him. He gathered the documents into a neat pile. Mia needs to see these. My pulse quickened. She won't believe me if I show her. Then I'll show her. Jason stood up, determination hardening his features. We're having dinner at Dad's tonight. Some potential investors are coming. Mia will be there. You should come too. Fear and hope battled within me. Your father won't want me there. Too bad. For the first time in years, Jason looked at me with something like respect. It's time everyone heard the truth. That evening, I dressed carefully in a simple black dress and pearl earrings that had belonged to Ruth. I drove to David's house with the documents locked in a portfolio in the trunk of my car, and my heart hammering against my ribs. Jason met me in the driveway. Dad doesn't know you're coming, he warned. He's going to be furious. I've dealt with your father's fury before, I said, squaring my shoulders. I'm not afraid of him anymore. Inside, the dining room was set for a formal dinner. David stood talking to 2 men in expensive suits, the investors presumably. Angela fluttered around the table, adjusting flower arrangements. Mia sat off to the side, scrolling through her phone. David saw me first. His smile froze, then disappeared entirely. What is she doing here? He demanded, glaring at Jason. I invited her, Jason said simply. We need to talk, Dad. All of us. Mia's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing as they landed on me. Jason, what's going on? Before Jason could answer, I stepped forward. I have something you all need to see. Not now, David hissed, darting a glance at the investors who were watching with obvious interest. We have guests. This concerns them too, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Especially if they're considering investing with you. The taller investor raised an eyebrow. Is there a problem, David? David forced a laugh. No problem. My ex-wife has a flair for the dramatic, that's all. He turned to me, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Leave now, Tammy, or I'll have you thrown out. Like you threw me out of our children's lives? I asked, matching his tone. With lies and manipulation? Mom, stop it, Mia snapped, rising from her seat. You're embarrassing yourself. Jason moved to stand beside me. Mia, you need to listen. Dad's been lying to us. About everything. David's face darkened. Jason, whatever she's told you. I've seen the proof. Jason interrupted. The loans you tried to take out against Gran Ruth's property without Mom's knowledge. The gambling debts. The affair with Vanessa. At the mention of Vanessa, Angela's head whipped toward David, shock registering on her face. Vanessa? She repeated. Your assistant, Vanessa? The room fell silent. David's mask of composure slipped, revealing panic beneath. This is ridiculous, he sputtered. Tammy's clearly poisoned Jason's mind with her delusions. I opened my portfolio and withdrew a single page, a transcript of the phone call Kelly had overheard. Is this a delusion, David? Your own words about how you manipulated our children against me. The investors exchanged uncomfortable glances. One of them cleared his throat. Perhaps we should reschedule, David. No, David said sharply, then moderated his tone. This is just a family misunderstanding. It won't affect our business. A family misunderstanding? I repeated incredulously. You destroyed our family for money. Money you needed because of gambling debts you hid from all of us. Mia stood frozen, her gaze darting between her father and me. Dad? Is this true? David's expression hardened. Of course not. Your mother is trying to ruin me because she's bitter about the divorce. Then explain these, Jason said, pulling out more documents from my portfolio. The bank statements showing large transfers to offshore accounts, the threatening emails from creditors. Explain why you needed Mom's property so badly that you were willing to turn us against her to get it. David lunged for the papers, but Jason stepped back, keeping them out of reach. You ungrateful little. David started, then caught himself, aware of the investors watching. Jason, after everything I've done for you. What exactly have you done for him, David? I asked quietly. Besides use him as a pawn in your games? Angela was backing toward the door, her expression a mixture of hurt and anger. I think I deserve some answers about Vanessa, David. David's carefully constructed world was crumbling around him. He looked from the retreating investors to his suspicious girlfriend to his confused daughter and defiant son. And then to me, the woman he'd thought he'd broken for good. This isn't over, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You're right, I agreed. It's just beginning. I turned to Mia, whose face had gone pale. I know you don't trust me right now, but read the documents. Ask Kelly about what she heard. Make up your own mind. For a moment Mia said nothing. Then in a small voice that reminded me of her childhood. Did Dad really have an affair? David started to speak, but Jason cut him off. Yes, Mia. For years. While Mom was taking care of us, running the household, supporting his career, he was cheating on her. Tears welled in Mia's eyes. She looked at her father, searching his face for denial, for explanation, for anything that would make this untrue. But David for once had no words. I think, I said gently, we should continue this conversation somewhere else. Jason, Mia. Will you come with me? To my surprise, Mia nodded, gathering her purse with trembling hands. Mia, don't you dare leave with her, David warned, desperation edging into his voice. But Mia wasn't listening. She followed Jason and me to the door, pausing only to look back at the father she had idolized for so long. You made me hate her, she whispered. How could you do that? We left David standing in his expensive house with his collapsing lies, 3 pairs of footsteps echoing on the marble floor as we walked away together. 1 year later. The farmhouse looks different now. The sagging porch has been repaired. The overgrown yard tamed into neat flower beds and vegetable gardens. Fresh white paint covers the weathered siding, and new curtains hang in windows that sparkle in the morning sun. But the biggest change isn't visible from the outside. It's in the beating heart of this old house. I pour another cup of coffee and step onto the porch, watching the autumn leaves dance across the lawn. The renovation was therapeutic, each fixed floorboard and painted wall helping me rebuild more than just a house. This place that Ruth left me has become a true sanctuary, a physical manifestation of my reclaimed life. Mom? Have you seen my blue notebook? Jason calls from inside. Check the sunroom, I answer, smiling to myself. My son has been staying with me on weekends while he finishes his graduate program in architectural design. Following the path I once abandoned. Having him here, watching him spread his textbooks across Ruth's old dining table, feels like a miracle I never thought I'd experience again. The road back hasn't been easy. After that night at David's house, Mia retreated into herself, overwhelmed by the revelations about her father. She didn't speak to either of us for weeks, needing time to process the years of manipulation she'd endured. Jason adjusted more quickly, his suspicions about David apparently older and deeper than I'd realized. I always wondered why he worked so hard to keep us from you, he told me one night as we sorted through old family photos. It didn't make sense unless he was hiding something. The legal aftermath was messy. David didn't go down without a fight. When his investors pulled out after witnessing our confrontation, he became desperate. He filed a lawsuit claiming I had defamed him, that the documents were fabricated. His gambling debts mounted, and his relationship with Angela ended when she discovered his ongoing affair with Vanessa. My lawyer, Ellen, helped me navigate the choppy waters. We countersued for emotional damages and parental alienation. In the end, David settled rather than face the public scrutiny of a trial where all his secrets would be exposed. His business collapsed, and last I heard, he had moved to Florida to work for his brother's insurance company. I don't take pleasure in his downfall. The father of my children becoming a cautionary tale isn't cause for celebration. But I do take comfort in the vindication, in having my truth finally acknowledged, in watching my children gradually understand that I had never been the villain in our family story. The sound of a car in the driveway pulls me from my thoughts. Mia's silver Prius parks next to Jason's motorcycle, and my breath catches as it always does when I see my daughter. After months of distance, our relationship is still fragile. A delicate seedling that needs careful tending. Each visit feels like a gift. She emerges from the car carrying a large canvas bag. Her hair is shorter now, cut into a practical bob that frames her face. She looks more like me than she ever did before. Mom, she calls, waving as she makes her way up the path. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was awful. You're right on time, I assure her. Coffee's fresh. Inside, Jason has gathered his study materials and is clearing the table. Ruth's old farmhouse seems to expand and brighten with both my children under its roof, something that still feels miraculous after the years of estrangement. I brought something, Mia says, reaching into her canvas bag. She pulls out a thick photo album bound in worn blue leather. I found this in my storage unit when I was cleaning last weekend. My heart skips a beat as I recognize it. Our family album, the one I thought had been lost in the divorce. I reach for it with trembling hands, opening to the first page where tiny footprints and hospital bracelets document Mia's entrance into the world. I thought you might want it back, she says, her voice tentative. I saved it when Dad was. When he was getting rid of things after you left. The small act of rebellion. My teenage daughter secretly preserving this piece of our history while publicly siding with her father, brings tears to my eyes. Thank you, I whisper, turning pages filled with birthday parties, beach vacations, school plays. This means everything to me. Jason joins us at the table and soon we're all laughing over forgotten memories. Mia's disastrous attempt at cooking Thanksgiving dinner when she was 12, Jason's unfortunate middle school haircut, the family camping trip where we all got poison ivy. Remember when Gran Ruth taught us to make apple butter? Mia asks, pointing to a photo of herself and Jason standing on chairs at Ruth's kitchen counter, wooden spoons in hand. I was thinking about planting some apple trees next spring, I say casually. On the south side of the property. Ruth always said that was the best spot. Jason and Mia exchange a glance I can't quite interpret. About that, Jason begins. We've been talking. We want to help with the farmhouse, Mia interrupts. I know we can't make up for all those years, but what she's trying to say, Jason continues when Mia falters, is that we want to be part of this place too. I could design an addition, maybe convert the old barn into a guest house. And Mia's considering moving back to the area after her contract ends in December. I look at my children, these adults who once looked at me with suspicion and resentment, now offering branches of reconciliation I hadn't dared hope for. I'd love that, I say simply, afraid to say more lest my voice break. Later, after a dinner of Ruth's beef stew recipe and homemade bread, we sit on the porch swing watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Mia leans her head against my shoulder, a gesture so reminiscent of her childhood that my heart constricts. I'm sorry, Mom, she says quietly, for believing him, For the things I said to you. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. You were manipulated by someone who should have protected you. That's not your fault. Still, she insists. I should have known better. Should have questioned why he worked so hard to keep us away from you. We can't change the past. I tell her, the hard-won wisdom of the last year settling over me like a warm blanket. We can only decide what we do with the present. Jason joins us, bringing mugs of hot cider. To new beginnings, he says, raising his in a toast. We clink our mugs together. These three survivors of a storm that nearly destroyed us. The farmhouse stands solid behind us, its lights glowing warmly against the gathering dusk. A beacon of safety in a world that once seemed so treacherous. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. Healing isn't linear. There will be difficult days ahead. Trust once shattered rebuilds slowly. But sitting here with my children on Ruth's porch, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Hope, unfurling like the first green shoots after a long winter. Ruth once told me that the women in our family were like the farmhouse itself. Weathered by storms but standing firm. Rooted in land that couldn't be taken away. As I look at my children's faces in the fading light, I know she was right. We are rebuilding more than relationships here. We are reclaiming our truth, our bonds, our shared history. The legacy that was nearly stolen from us. And this time no one will take it away.